I'm Maddie and we're here today to do some inference work. So I thought we've done a lot of grammar videos, so it might be a nice idea to do a reading one. And the skill that I thought we could focus on, which goes all the way from year 1 through to year 6 and beyond, I suppose, is the skill of summary. Now, when authors write books, they obviously want us to think about what they've written, and they obviously want to impact on us as the reader. So the writer chooses their words really carefully and creates characters and really exciting plots and settings so that we want to read more and so that we really enjoy a book. And I think sometimes when we're reading, I'm not sure that we always stop enough to reflect on what we've read. I don't mean that in a really boring way, like we have to get a book out and write loads of notes, but just as we're working through a text, are we making almost like a voiceover that expresses what we're thinking about what's just happened? So we might be thinking, oh, I didn't think he'd do that, or I'm really surprised at her, or that's a bit of a shock, or I wasn't expecting this to happen. And those sorts of questions or inferences that we make in that we're summarising what we've read. So sometimes we do need to record our answers in the purpose of if we're doing a comprehension, or if, for example, you were doing a SAT, a reading paper, you might be asked what your impression of a character is and have you got some evidence to support that. So something that I would definitely recommend that all children are part of is being able to talk about characters, events, plots, descriptions, relationships, whatever their opinion is about something. And the way that I would always present it to our younger readers is in a table format, and I will ask them, what do you think and how do you know? And basically being able to put it into a table gives the children a little bit of not a formula, but a technique, a strategy to be able to articulate their response in a way that we really know that they've understood what they've read. So for the purpose of this, just because I can't use a text with the assumption that everybody knows the plot and the characters, I'm going to use the example of Red Riding Hood and say, what do we know about Red Riding Hood and how do we know? Now, you could stop this now if you're doing it with your children, or we can just keep going. So some children might say Red Riding Hood is brave, and I would always recommend that they use a bullet point to make their point. So Red Riding Hood is brave, and I always talk about using an evidence arrow to put the evidence to support the fact that she's brave. So they may then write here, because she goes to grandma's alone, or she goes to grandma's, I'm just going to put it short, by herself. Now, another child might say, I don't think that's brave, I think that's careless or silly. And they could change that point and say, my point, I'm using the same evidence, but I think it was careless of Red Riding Hood to go by herself. Now, another child might say, oh, I've got a different point. I think Red Riding Hood is kind, and I would remind them, let's put a new bullet point. And the evidence is that she takes cakes to grandma. And we can keep going. She takes cakes to grandma. Now, that's just written in a note format, and I wouldn't expect any more than that. That's the way we're talking about characters and what the children think about them. Now, as children progress up through school, this language of what and how evolves into impression and evidence. But the actual strategy of recording what they think of a character with the bullet point and the arrow can stay the same. So children of year 3 and older, I think, really should be using the impression evidence. And that is really great in preparing children for the Key Stage 2 test, because this sort of a question is where the 3 marks come in and usually appears with the 3rd text in the reading test booklet. So this impression evidence, as a scaffold, as a transition for children who've entered Key Stage 2 into year 3, we could put in brackets, what do you think and how do you know? And then they can still see the formula that they were used to, the format that they were used to doing in Key Stage 1, or even in early years. I've had early years children saying, what do you think of Goldilocks? She was mean because she did this. And then being able to just record, what do you think of the highway rat? He was a baddie because he took the food off the other animals while they were travelling. So, you know, the children can express their opinion, and giving them a formula or a way to tabulate their efforts. So with older children, I'm going to do it in the context of Romeo and Juliet. If we were saying, what's your impression of Romeo? Some Key Stage 2 children might say that Romeo was a risk taker, and they might give their evidence that he got married to Juliet in secret. Other children might say that Romeo was naive because he believed that getting married to a Capulet would end the feud between the Montagues and the Capulets. Somebody else might say that Romeo was brave because he was prepared to battle against Tybalt, whereas another child might say that Romeo was foolish because he sacrificed his new marriage to Juliet by killing her cousin Tybalt. So we can still record the point and the arrow, the point and the arrow, and I would really only recommend doing 2, asking children to make 2 points and 2 arrows. Now what you might do is you might give them an impression of foolish, an impression of caring for Romeo, and then ask them to find the evidence to support the point. And that's kind of a halfway house in that you're scaffolding their thoughts because you've given them the impression. Equally, you could give them the evidence and ask them to then try and come up with the point that matched that evidence. So I hope that's been useful for you. And if you would like to check out any of the other videos which cover a range of topics from grammar to reading, then obviously subscribe to the channel and feel free to use them. Thank you.